Morning. Welcome to the Theory Notes. This is Chef Christian. We're talking SITX WHS005 Participate in Safe Work Practices. Talk through these slides. This will give you some information on WHS, Workplace Health and Safety. So we're talking through information about the theory notes. In conjunction with the knowledge tests and the information that the unit of competency deals with. So getting straight into it, we talk about the PCBU. I was actually talking with someone this week about PCBU, the person conducting a business undertaking. This is a legal term. And under various laws, including WHS law, this is the person or persons responsible for the workplace, what goes on. You get several examples of PCBU. Okay. Might be a public and private company. Could be partners in a partnership, sole traders, self-employed people, government departments and authorities, associations if they have one more or one or more employees, local government councils, independent schools, cooperatives, universities. Yeah. So you certainly get duty holders as per the document there, the sort of infographic. And there are other people responsible as well, duty holders, but PCBU is this one section, and officers are the people that fall under that person that deliver the policies and procedures. Just in terms of obligations that the legislation imposes on the PCBU. Okay, right there we're talking about providing safe systems of work. Right, so we talk about in WHS, everyone is responsible for everyone's safety. Okay, more of these obligations are ensuring the safe use of plant structures and substances. Plant meaning sort of equipment and everything from walls to equipment to equipment, all these sorts of things. That's not plant as in trees. More obligations: provide adequate facilities for the welfare of workers. Right. So again, that comes back to duty of care. Supply adequate information, training, instruction and supervision. Ensure compliance with requirements under regulations and legislation. Put in place effective systems for monitoring the health of workers and workplace conditions. Create and maintain a safe work environment. Maintain the premises used for accommodation for workers. And have meaningful and open consultation about WHS with workers, representatives and committees. This is called a duty to consult. Just going back to that second last point there, maintain the premises used for accommodation for workers. That's not necessarily workers to sleep. That's accommodating them in the workplace. I used to work for a Turkish man at a restaurant in Sydney, and I heard recently that he is facing jail time and fines because he back in Turkey, which is where he's from, because he was running a restaurant in Turkey and there was a wall that was not safe and he knew it was not safe and he still did nothing about it. And the wall fell down and maybe killed someone, I think. So yeah, this all sort of comes under WHS legislation and maintain the premises. So primary duty of care, okay, for PCB use is to ensure workers and others are not exposed to a risk to their health and safety, and to make sure the health and safety of others is not put at risk from work done as part of the business. Again, coming back to this, brick wall. I mean, it's fundamental, isn't it? You're really just focusing on yourself and your own money. Penalties, right? Examples of penalties that businesses may face if they fail to observe the requirements. Receive a letter of caution about a breach, a provisional improvement notice from an HSR, right? So that's internal. Requirement to comply with orders contained in an enforceable undertaking. Yeah, so that's a document that says you must do this. Receive an improvement notice or a prohibition notice from a WorkSafe inspector. Receive an on-the-spot fine, a penalty notice. Agree to comply with an enforceable undertaking and possible prosecution. All right, so that's all serious stuff. As I said, this guy in Turkey, he's off to jail if they can catch him, I suppose. Yeah, okay. So induction training. Right, induction training is a fundamental, right? Legislative requirement. It's an important process as it provides the new employee with the skills and knowledge to effectively integrate into their new role and contribute productively and safely to their team, whether it is the induction of WHS requirements or of daily job responsibilities. Proper induction programs will set the new team member up for success, whilst also ensuring existing staff are not hindered or endangered by the new team member's lack of knowledge or training. So it's essentially saying, and we talk about this in several points, you need to be provided with training to be able to do your job properly. If you're not given training and something goes wrong, ultimately that's the workplace's fault for not training you properly. Right? That's what the legislation says. All right. Let's talk about some practices and procedures, right, that might apply to induction training. Induction training must be provided to new workers and those who are changing roles. It must be formalised and delivered by an approved person, such as a supervisor or manager of the area concerned. The details must be logged and kept on file. Safety protocols related to all areas of work for the new worker must be provided and explained. This can include safe work practices, job safety analysis sheets, provision of safety data sheets, MSDS, we also call them material safety data sheets, hazard inspections, risk analysis and risk controls. Practices related to the role must be demonstrated and explained with opportunity provided for practical experience for the new worker, and active supervision of the new worker must be provided. Pretty straightforward stuff. There's obligations the employer has in relation to the provision of information, training and instruction. So the legislation says that the workplace must ensure that information, training and instruction provided to a worker is suitable and adequate, having regard to the nature of the work carried out by the worker, the nature of the risks associated with the work at the time the information, training or instruction is provided, and the control measures implemented. Okay. Remember in food safety we talked about control limits and measures. Ensure so far as is reasonably practicable that the information, training and instruction provided under this clause is provided in a way that is readily understandable by any person to whom it is provided. Right, so that's also saying that it can't, training and instruction must be clear so that people can read it. It can't be misleading. So, a few obligations here imposed on an officer under the WHS Act in relation to exercising due diligence. These officers must acquire and keep up-to-date knowledge of WHS matters. They must understand the operations of the business and the hazards and risks involved. They must ensure appropriate resources and processes are provided to enable hazards to be identified and risks to be eliminated or minimised. They must ensure information regarding incidents, hazards and risks are received and the information is responded to in a timely way. They must ensure the business has and implements processes for complying with any legal duty or obligation. And they must verify the provision and use of resources and processes. Right, so these are people that get put into committees and, are the representative. You tend to find in small businesses you don't get this, but, that just means that all the responsibility lies on the shoulders of the PCBU in that instance. Okay, talking about duty to consult. I mentioned that previously. Duty to consult is this information around the responsibility of the PCBU to involve stakeholders in their decisions around WHS. Okay, so responsibilities for or actions employees are required to take. It should be sharing information with anyone likely to be directly affected by a work health and safety matter, and give them the opportunity to express their views and contribute to any decisions. The employer must take the stakeholders' views into account and let them know the outcome of the consultation. They must consult, cooperate and coordinate activities with other individuals and organisations, for example, HSRs, representatives, and they must establish a consultation arrangement that suits the needs of the workers, possibly toolbox talks or scheduled meetings within the committees. Yeah, not a lot of places do this. So when you find a place that does this, it's beneficial to be involved in it and to have a voice. Okay, what are 4 practical steps management can take to suggest, implement and monitor inclusions for policies and procedures? And there's a list there. Practical steps. They could distribute notification of their intentions. They could convene safety meetings or raise issues as agendas in meetings, describe proposed inclusions and explain the rationale, share all known information. There's a list of things there. Formalise changes, participate in the reporting and analysis of the trials. Yeah. It's all very dry, this information. Very legislative and compliance based. Okay, so moving on, we're into the next knowledge test, and we talk about legislation and how a worker is defined. Worker is defined as anyone who performs paid work in a capacity for an employer, business, or organisation. The term can also include unpaid workers such as volunteers or work experience students. A worker is also anyone who is an employee, a trainee or apprentice, an outworker, contractor or subcontractor, an employee of the subcontractor or contractor, an employer of a labour hire company, a volunteer or student on work experience. Right. And so under the legislation, the employee has responsibilities for the workers. That is to take reasonable care for this is the workers need to take reasonable care for their own health and safety. Remember, just previously I talked about it's everyone's responsibility. Everyone is responsible for WHS. I'm responsible for yours. You're responsible for mine. We're responsible for everyone else's, right? So it's not a case of, oh, well, that doesn't affect me. It's still a case that it affects someone else or may affect someone else. And workers are responsible for complying with any reasonable instructions. Okay. And there's consequences for failing to comply. Right? We might be giving verbal warnings. We might be giving written warnings, reduced hours, training, retraining, on-the-spot fines, even dismissal. Okay, under the legislation. Again, a lot of that comes down to the serious nature of the offence and the determination under specific policies and procedures of the business. Let's talk about safe work practices. So if we're working in a bar, some safe work practices might be that we need to hold current RSA certificate. We should be reporting violence or threatening behaviour. We should be refusing service when people are, maybe threatening or being antisocial or intoxicated. We shouldn't ever enter a cellar or cool room unless we've been trained, or even perform tasks unless we've been trained. We should never pick up broken glass using bare hands. Right? Broken glass should be wrapped before disposing of it, unless it's going into a glass bin, obviously. There are requirements to complete training, specifically safe manual handling, safe chemical handling, okay, and a couple of others there. Room attendants, more safe work practices, very similar to some of the other points there. We talk about training. We should talk about, room attendant. Housekeeping is quite physical in nature, right? So there's a list of tasks there that point to, specifics of a lot of it's manual handling, right? Making beds with two people. Certainly protective gloves should be worn. Bending at the knees, pushing trolleys, don't drag them. A lot of this is all sort of manual handling and PPE. PPE being personal protective equipment. I'll skip over that one and come back. So we're looking at some risks, right? Some possible risks that bar staff may face. Cuts from broken glasses, okay? Intoxicated customers. Manual handling of cartons of beverages, right? Lifting boxes, carrying things. Possible cuts from using knives to cut fruit or box cutters. Slippery on wet floors. Possible cuts from various other things. Falling down unguarded steps to the cellar. Hot surfaces where the bar, at the bar where espresso is served. In a cafe that I owned, I spilt coffee, actually. We used to have this space at the front of the espresso machine that was, which is where we used to load up our coffees. This one time I just turned around and I knocked the coffee and a double shot of espresso, hot espresso, fell over and poured straight onto my foot. I had third-degree burns, right? Now I was wearing protective shoes, but it went straight into my shoe. soaked into my sock and burnt my foot. Gee, it was hot. It blistered up, and it was terrible. Yeah. So you know, it's. I guess there are the challenge is that there are always going to be issues, and what we need to do is address specifics like this. We would fill out incident reports, accident and incident reports about this. This would then go off to be um, decided upon as to whether a risk analysis should be undertaken, whether changes needed to be made to either physicalities or policies and procedures. So yeah, you know, our policies and procedures are a lot of the time based on legislation, but also possibly based on past experiences. Room attendants, just going back to, I guess the safe work practices that we talked about. The safe work practices, again, like I say, a lot of the time are based on legislation, but possible risks as well, right? So the risks we can see are back injuries from bending over, strains and injuries from, making bed solo or on your own or moving. Repetitive strain injuries, slipping on wet bathroom floors, tripping on cords. Yeah, lots of different specifics there. Exposure to needle injuries, exposure to blood, feces, urine. It's, this is why we have specific policies around, PPE, gloves, and manual handling. Cool. So risks for security. Okay. Yeah, we're talking about here possible security risks might be loss or theft of cash, loss or theft of stock or assets, property damage, customers being locked in overnight, doors and windows are not locked or closed as required, violent or intoxicated persons, fire or robbery. Okay, we're talking about evacuation standards. And this is an important point for what comes up in one of your projects. You have to demonstrate your understanding of evacuation. And so these are the specifics here. We should be an explanation of the warning that will be given in the event there is a need to evacuate. Right. So generally, you get there'll be some sort of alarm that goes off, and the first alarm should have a warning of what's going on. We should have maps of the area and venues with evacuation routes and some sort of orientation. So once we leave the building, where are we going, or where are the exit points? General directions as to what to do. Specific directions of what to do in the event of a fire. Location of items such as fire extinguisher, fire hoses, buckets, fire blankets, etc. There should be a legend to explain the icons. In general, you have just sort of an image, and certain things are not always explanatory. And then directions on what to do when the evacuation assembly area is reached. So whenever there is a hazard in the workplace, it cannot be immediately resolved by the worker without causing danger to themselves, and after a verbal report has been made to the nominated person. Right, look at that. 1 in 6 people wouldn't report a hazard if they saw one. Right. See something, say something is what we say when we see something. Okay. A couple of other points here are accident and incident reports, incident accident reports, however we want to say it. And there's a list of things down the side there, things that need to be included. Right? There are 8 specifically. One, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah. So a lot of those points need to be in there. Fairly straightforward. Now, when all of these documents and points occur, we need to be keeping a register of points that are going on. We call this a register of injuries. And this should be done regardless of whether a claim has been made for compensation. Okay. And that should include the name of the injured worker, the worker's address, the worker's age at the time of inquiry, the worker's occupation, the industry in which the worker was engaged at the time of injury, the time and the date, the nature and the cause. Commonly, these are, all these reports are kept or made in 2 formats, either hard copy or soft copy. Okay. Moving on. There are obligations for duty holders to identify hazards in the workplace. And that is all around identifying hazards, right? So a duty holder in managing risks to health and safety must identify reasonably foreseeable hazards that could give rise to risk to health and safety. And that's typified, that's federal, that's all different states, okay? Let's go back to talk about cash floats, okay? 4 safe handling procedures, several safe handling procedures that staff need to be trained in to be responsible for this. Registers should be closed when not in use. Right? They should be locked when staff are not behind the bar. Security staff should be used to move money around the venue. Cash collection from the venue by a security cash collection service. That's quite funny. I'll tell you a story in a second. Staff to never make a payout from a register to anyone for any reason. Cash on the premises that is left overnight should be placed into a torch and drill resistant safe, and all monies received on behalf of the venue should be passed on to the venue. I used to work at a hotel group in the city, and on Fridays we used to collect a substantial amount of cash. Now, the 2 junior managers were tasked with filling that cash up in backpacks and walking it probably 2 kilometres to a bank to deposit it. Crazy. All because they wanted to save on security staff. Unbelievable. That's not a focus on people's health and safety. So, talking about management practices in relation to equipment and managing the security of the equipment. There'd be an asset register. The asset register will be a list of all the assets, anything of worth. If I think about a kitchen, we get such small pieces of equipment that, if we've got an item that's worth $1, it would be unlikely that would be in the asset register, okay? As if one of them goes missing, these items are probably too small to have asset tags on them. However, there would be an asset register that would list tart rings, 30, for example. Okay. Some more specific items around this equipment. Maybe we might alarm items. Maybe we might use closed circuit television. We might limit access and exit points. Maybe all items might be marked with the name of the venue. Certainly attractive items, we would probably keep those away from doorways, right? So people can't just grab them as they walk out the door. And certainly there would be a prohibition on employees using assets for their personal benefit. This would include banning assets being taken off the premises. Keys. The procedures around security of keys would be in line with these other points around cash flows, equipment, document filing. Certainly staff would not be allowed to take the keys off the premises. Possibly, it's not always correct. Some places everyone gets given a key and each key is tagged. Certain keys are only used for certain doorways. These keys would normally be marked as do not copy. And staff should be informed that they are not to lend their keys to anyone. Possibly if keys are banned from being taken off the premises, there would generally be a key safe that would be used so that when staff could leave their keys in the workplace. Certainly, certain keys would only be issued to certain staff as well, meaning that some specific rooms would only be available for access to certain people. And then last little one there is on security controls and what would we put into a venue procedure to control patrons. Right. Maybe we might screen people on entry. Maybe we might check the identification of people, certainly around people's looking underage. Maybe we might scan ID documents into a system. We might post signs about acceptable and unacceptable behaviour. We would probably ensure staff lead by example in terms of their behaviour. We will be proactive in identifying unacceptable behaviour and language. We might ban people who fail to comply with house rules. And we might use security staff to monitor crowds and deal with crowd control. Specifically in bars, a lot of this information relates to. But a lot of these points could be about just entry into specific places. A lot of places have key cards with identification that allows people in. We directly link to their ID documents. Okay, and that's it. Thank you for listening. This was the theory notes on SITX WHS005 Participate in Safe Work Practices. See you next time.